Sometimes the hardest part of life isn't knowing what's right or wrong, it's deciding when you can't see what comes next. The Vampire Problem: How to Make Big Choices When You Can't See the Future, is a story that will challenge how you think about every major decision you've ever made. If you crave stories that awaken your mind and stir your soul, hit subscribe and join the circle of thinkers who dare to question the unseen. The night was colder than usual when Evelyn stood at the edge of the old cathedral courtyard, the moonlight cutting through the fog like a silver blade. She had never imagined that her life, once built around morning coffee, office deadlines, and weekend calls with her mother, would bring her here, to a moment where a choice would define the rest of her existence. The man standing before her wasn't exactly human anymore. He was something between myth and tragedy, the living embodiment of eternity. It's not about life or death, he had told her. It's about time. Evelyn had met Lucien 6 weeks ago, though time seemed irrelevant now. It had been after a seminar on existential philosophy, a subject she had pursued while trying to make sense of her own fractured ambitions. She was 32, bright, deeply introspective, and tired of decisions that seemed to go nowhere. Her career was stable but uninspiring, her relationships fleeting, her sense of purpose fading like the last echo of a forgotten dream. When Lucien approached her that night in the candlelit back room of the seminar, his words had been a curious mix of absurdity and precision. If you could live forever, he asked, would you dare to decide today what to live for tomorrow? She had laughed, thinking it a trick of philosophy, until she noticed his eyes, not dark, not light, but infinitely still. He told her about his life, or rather, his afterlife. He had been human once, a philosopher who sought answers beyond mortality. Now, centuries later, he was offering her what he called the vampire problem, not the curse of drinking blood or avoiding sunlight, but the curse of permanence itself. Once you become something that doesn't die, every decision becomes irreversible. What if, after 100 years, she regretted her choice? What if, after 1,000, she wished for the end that would never come? Evelyn thought about it endlessly. The question wasn't about vampires, it was about all human choices that could not be undone. Marriage, parenthood, career, belief, betrayal. We live as if tomorrow can fix today, she realized, but what if tomorrow never changes anything at all? The more she considered it, the more she saw the reflection of her own fears. She was already living cautiously, afraid to commit to anything that might last too long, because permanence terrified her more than death. That, Lucien told her, was the human curse, not mortality, but hesitation. The vampire problem, he explained one evening as they walked through an abandoned library, is the same problem you face every day. You want to know the outcome before you choose. But life doesn't work that way. The future hides its cards until after the wager is made. Evelyn wondered whether this was a metaphor or an invitation, until Lucien placed before her a single, red vial, glimmering under candlelight. Drink this, and you'll see what eternity feels like. You'll know what it means to live beyond choice, because every decision after this one will mean nothing. She stared at it, her heart pounding. Was it a test? Was it real? She couldn't tell. Yet deep down, she felt the truth. Whether real or not, the vial represented every irreversible choice she had ever run from. She didn't drink it that night. Instead, she returned home, pacing her apartment as the city lights blinked below her window. She thought about her father, who had stayed in a marriage long after the love was gone because he couldn't undo what he'd chosen. She thought about her friend Mira, who moved to another country chasing freedom but spent her nights calling home, lost between two worlds. She thought about herself, caught between passion and fear, longing for meaning but unwilling to risk comfort. The vampire problem was everywhere. It wasn't about blood, it was about blindness, the blindness of not knowing how life will unfold once you commit. Days passed, and Lucien didn't appear again. Evelyn thought she'd imagined him, that her mind had conjured a symbol for the uncertainty she'd been running from. But the thought of that vial haunted her, the way its light pulsed like a heartbeat, the way his voice lingered. The future doesn't reveal itself to those who refuse to move forward. So she decided to test the theory in her own way. She quit her job, not because she had another lined up, but because she realized she had been choosing safety over authenticity. For weeks, fear gnawed at her, but something inside began to awaken, the same part that had drawn her to philosophy in the first place. She started writing again, pouring her thoughts into essays about choice, uncertainty, and freedom. She called the series The Vampire Problem, each entry exploring a decision that could never be unmade. People began reading her work. Strangers reached out, confessing their own fears, mothers questioning their choices, artists who abandoned dreams, lovers stuck in doubt. It struck her that everyone was, in their own way, facing the vampire problem. Then one evening, Lucien appeared again, silent as the moonlight. "You chose," he said. "But not the way you expected." Evelyn asked him what he meant. He smiled faintly. "You faced the problem without the potion. You learned that immortality isn't about endless time, it's about owning the moments that cannot be undone." She realized he was right. Every irreversible choice was its own eternity, a fragment of life that would never change no matter what followed. That night, he left her again, leaving behind the red vial. She didn't drink it, she didn't throw it away either. She placed it on her desk as a reminder. The unknown will always be terrifying, but doing nothing is a decision too, one that defines its own kind of forever. Years passed. Evelyn's writings turned into a book, and her book into a movement. People began to speak of the vampire problem as a philosophy, a lens through which to see decision-making in an uncertain world. She taught that there are 3 truths to remember when making big choices. First, that the future will always remain unseen. Second, that every choice, even the wrong ones, builds the life you inhabit. And third, that refusing to decide is the only way to guarantee regret. One evening, while giving a lecture to a crowded hall, she noticed a man standing in the back, tall, still, familiar. Their eyes met, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw Lucien smiling. But when she blinked, he was gone. Maybe he was never real. Maybe he was the embodiment of her inner wisdom, given form so she could face herself. Either way, she had chosen. And that choice, to live, to act, to move forward without seeing the whole map, had changed everything. In the quiet hours of the night, when fear crept back, she would stare at the vial and whisper to herself, "The unknown isn't your enemy. It's the place where your future is born." Time went on. Decades passed. Evelyn grew old, though her spirit remained vibrant. One day, she found herself alone again, standing at the edge of that same cathedral courtyard, now overgrown and forgotten. The moon was high, just as before. The vial was still in her pocket. She had never opened it, never needed to. Her life had been filled with choices, some beautiful, some tragic, but all hers. And in that moment, she understood the lesson fully. You can't see the future because it's meant to be created, not predicted. The vampire problem isn't about vampires at all. It's about courage, the courage to step into darkness without knowing what waits ahead. She smiled, set the vial down on the stone steps, and whispered, "Someone else will need you more." As she turned to leave, the fog thickened, and for a second, she thought she saw Lucien again, watching her from the shadows, nodding in quiet approval. The world, she realized, belongs to those who choose, not those who wait. And perhaps that was the real immortality he had offered her all along, the kind that lives inside every decision made without certainty but with conviction. She walked into the night, her steps echoing through time, her story already becoming legend, a reminder to everyone who would come after her that the unknown isn't a curse but an invitation to live deeply. Years later, people would find her writings, read her words, and feel something awaken in their hearts. They too would face their vampire problems, the unseeable futures, the irreversible decisions, and remember Evelyn's truth, that life only begins when you stop demanding guarantees and start embracing risks. Because, in the end, not choosing is still a choice, and it's the only one that steals your future without asking permission. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think about your own choices, your own unseen futures, don't let the moment pass. Share it, talk about it, reflect on the decisions you've been postponing. Subscribe for more powerful, mind-awakening stories that challenge how you see yourself and the world. Because the future won't wait for certainty, and neither should you.